silence or shut off your cell phones and join us in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Any additions or deletions to the agenda at this time? No, other commissioner? Nope. Okay. So I know there's a lot of people here today, so I'm going to give a little bit of an overview before we get into our regular thing here. We do have 10:15 scheduled for the Oregon Department of Energy to be here to give us a guideline of what the commissioners' meeting is as far as the EPSEC process as an advisory to the EPSEC process. So that will be a time 10:15 item that will start. We have our regular agenda before that time. On the 10:15, I want them to be able to present to Ken and I. Dan's in Washington, D.C., so we won't be here. Present what our process is, what we have to do, what our responsibilities are. I've already set it up with Kellen to hopefully afterwards for her, or for them to, whoever all comes, for them to they'll have time to visit with everybody. One-on-one questions, I guess, is what I'd say that is. So hopefully that's the way it's going to work out. During the time that they're presenting to us, there will be limited amount of questions. Most of the questions will come from our staff or from Ken and I. And then afterwards there'll be a lot more dialogue with the Oregon Department of Energy at that time. Just lay out sort of the way that the process is going to go today. So any questions on that before I get into our regular agenda?
I'll just clarify for the public, especially the public on the camera. EPSAC is the Energy Facility Siting Council. Most of us picked that up in the notice of the
So we're going to move on with our agenda, and we got really some very good things today. We have our service pins going to be handed out today. Before I get to the ones that are here, our employees and everybody that's here for the receiving these service pins, I'd like to acknowledge our road department, which is under the road department. Josh Renfro got his 5-year pin, Rick Cobian, his 5-year pin, Mark Wells, 15-year pin, and John Williams, 25-year pin. In the sheriff's department, they done their own. Jose or Jesus, I'm going to watch the last name. Prieto, 10 years, and Stacy Rogers, 20 years. With that, I would like to ask Judy Clark to come up, and she'll present to public health.
Annie is getting her 5-year, but you're over 5-year. What are you at now? 5? Yeah. 5 this year. There you go. Lily is at 20 years. So she has 3. I won't pin you 3 times. But there you go. Congratulations.
So with that, we have some other ones. We have our department heads. This is given by Ken and I both. So our first one in 5 years, Dave Berman. Come on up, Dave. Thank you, my friend. Thank you. Appreciate it.
I get the pin this one.
I trust you.
Thank you, Dave.
Very good, sir. She's already received her pin, so we got an empty envelope, but that's Marla Slade, 5 years.
Where's it? In the DA office.
Yeah, is she not in here? And then the big guy, Jake Greer, 5 years, adult, corrections, and juvenile. Thank you for your service. I have to mention the team building, this whole thing about giving out the pins. Jake is the one that brought that to the Board of Commissioners. He's quite a team builder, so thank you, Jake, for following up with what you started. And Jay Collins, 10 years.
Only 45 more years to go.
And we have one other one that I will go ahead and mention, but we're going to present her pin tomorrow in North Lake, and that's Ronnie Lindsay with 15 weeks. Thank you, everybody, for your service. We appreciate it very much. Kenny Cooper's are next on our agenda. Come on up. Building official, building inspector, you fire. So just a short overview, then I'll let Kenny go ahead with it. Like Jamie and I have been working on the most efficient, effective way to be able to have all the inspections across all of Lake County. And we're working with Klamath County on a possible RGA, so I'll let you go over it.
Good morning. As Brad said, I want to work with an intergovernment agreement with Klamath County as far as some inspections that I am not certified in. So in order to comply with the state legally, these inspections would be commercial electrical, commercial structural inspections, and in return, I could do some inspections for Klamath County up in the Bonanza, Blythe, Beatty area. Neither counties would be under any obligation. It's more of a, you scratch my back, I scratch your back. No money's involved. No money's going to change hands. It's just strictly, like I said, no obligation. Just a county to county intergovernmental agreement.
Okay, so on this intergovernmental agreement, it would be between the two building officials or their designee to agree to taking on some inspections or giving financial one way or the other.
Correct.
Other than your time.
Correct.
And so this IGA is ready for us to possibly sign tomorrow, contingent upon Klamath County signing it.
Correct.
And legal counsel's reviewed it.
They have.
And I know Jennifer, I'm sorry to not acknowledge you, for Jennifer's put a lot of work into it too. So that's where we're at.
One more thing, this agreement allows me with the state, I need to expedite. The state has given me a timeline. And basically what this agreement will help me do is I'm able to do some inspections, not any industrial, not any big electrical, commercial, structural, but some of the smaller stuff with either my cell phone device and a recording or pictures of some sort with the inspector with Klamath County. The state will allow me to do that, and in return we'll be able to take over, Lake County will be able to take over the electrical program from the state, so they will actually be paying Lake County for electrical inspections. So there is some revenue coming into Lake County with this intergovernmental agreement.
Okay, this is on our agenda, act on tomorrow. Is that soon enough for what you're working on with the state?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely, yeah, the sooner here, and then obviously with Klamath County, you're just kind of at the mercy of what their process.
Have you had good discussion with their building official?
I have. I talked to Kevin yesterday. Him and I had a discussion. We talked about, rather than having, say, plan review, them doing plan review and as busy as they are, whether we can do away with the plan review, we're gonna basically sub it out to another organization, commercial plan review. And then we talked about just the inspection part between one county and another, and he was in agreement with that, as long as we're not detracting from one county's inspection process.
So the both of you are working that out?
Both of us are working that out.
Okay. Then I know, talking with Commissioner Boyd, he, same as I, put a lot of that responsibility on that, on their department head, same as you here, to work those things out. So I believe they'll probably sign.
Yeah, it sounds very promising.
Okay. Ken, you have any other questions?
No, just spoken with them on the site.
All right.
All right.
Thank you. We'll
Thank you.
have it on our agenda for tomorrow.
All right.
Great, thanks. Thanks, Kenny.
Mr. Johnson, order of sale of county property.
Thank you. As you guys all have in the packet is a proposed list of properties that were foreclosed on by the county for those not paying their taxes. That process was completed back in October of last year. 33 properties were deeded to the county, totaling a real market value of $349,332, which, according to policy for our land sale, are offered at 60% the real market value with a recording fee, which can total $214,368. So typically at most of these auctions, we don't sell a lot of properties, but there are two on the proposed list that I recommend that you pull that due to their location in sage grouse core habitat. This is something that we've done in years past and is appropriate to continue to try to work with the state on protecting that resource to avoid its
We
listing.
set the two in the light red.
Yeah, those are the two that are in red. 2018, 123 and 124. Just a 5 and a 10 acre parcel up off of plush cutoff road. So other than that, the auction, the only change from years past is that typically we've held the auction on the first Monday in June. I have a conflict that day, actually the first Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday of that week, and so I'm proposing that the auction is held on that Friday, June 1st. So it'll be advertised that way. We got to publish all the properties for 4 consecutive weeks just prior to the hearing. We'll have it on our website. We'll have copies available in the office and the various locations that they need to be posted.
We approve this tomorrow in our meeting, we'll definitely want to note that. You'll be in the meeting
Yep, I
tomorrow.
will be there tomorrow.
I'll make sure we note that for the record.
And just for the public, on the two that's being not offered for sale but retained by the county, in sage grouse habitat, prime habitat. One of the 2 factors that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service had for determining listing or not listing was basically one of the factors was loss of habitat. So we spent a lot of years, a lot of time with the state coming up with a plan, how do we protect sage grouse habitat, so to keep it from being listed. And it's just our part in there to not lose.
And I will point out that anyone can make a request to purchase county property. It would have to go through a similar process where it's advertised in the paper for 4 consecutive weeks, and then that auction would happen. By pulling it from this list, then you kind of avoid a lot of those potential folks that are just trying to flip the property to out of state buyers who are thinking that they're going to be able to put a dwelling on it right away. And then in that location, obviously there are no homes, and so it'd be best that we continue to try to avoid that.
Does any of these have any residents is pressure on
Well,
people?
there are none this year, unfortunately, which is fortunate for those who are, paying the taxes and lose their home.
They've got me off
Can
the
be a
list.
good benefit to working with other agencies to try to put that in the low-income housing.
All right,
Thanks, Darwin.
that should do.
We have a little while.
You'll be back at 10:15, or?
I'm gonna stick around a little bit.
I'm sure you will. All right. Our next item, Melanie, the juvenile copier.
The juvenile department needs a new copier. I did some research with Franklin Cannon. He can provide the features that they need for $23 more a month. Currently, they're coming from downstairs, upstairs, right? So it'd be nice to have that working down there for them. I added some supplemental facts on the numbers for you guys to look at, for the cost analysis. It'd be a standard 2-year lease. Yeah. So I'd like to go ahead and get that ordered. He'll have a contract after the funding is approved.
So
Pretty
this,
basic, yeah.
is this replacing one that's down there?
Yeah,
And is it, are we under contract with it, or did we
No.
own it outright?
we own that one outright.
Okay.
So it'd be surplus to,
It's not trading in or anything, it's, we'll surplus it.
So we own them one outright, and we'd be leasing this one for 2 years.
yes.
What's the difference? I mean, what's the rationale for leasing it for 2 years as opposed to purchase?
It's cheaper. And then that way we don't get stuck with equipment. It's just, we just trade it out for new stuff and keep everything current.
Yeah. I believe, Commissioner, you missed one of the meetings whenever we had an update on that and trying to get a whole plan to be able to get more efficient. I think it's about a 3-year plan. I don't want to speak for you, Melanie, but it's about a 3-year plan to rotate out, get us more efficient, and, and just following that. Okay. Meeting minutes, we have those for action tomorrow, or those for action tomorrow. So we'll just carry those till tomorrow. Next, we have letter of support. The road department has Melanie's name. I think I'll take the lead on that. Our road department's applying for federal land access grants. We have 4 different potential grants within that. So SCOAC has done a letter of support. This is just follow right on through to get a letter of support from the Board of Commissioners. So we have that. I'm sure you probably reviewed it, Commissioner. It's sort of standard practice. Any questions on that? All right. Next is a Red Rock archaeology report. This is a letter of authorization to conduct archaeological investigation in support of Red Rock Biofuels LLC. They've already done all this and needed for the Board of Commissioners to sign it, or one to sign it. I just wanted to make sure and bring it forward that it gets acknowledged and signed. So that's carry over for tomorrow also. So I think it's through our normal agenda. Commissioner, you have
Separate things.
3 different things here that you wanted to report on.
Yeah, first I'll save the strategic investment until I get the other 2 out of the way. So I'll drop down to law enforcement contract. You and Commissioner Sound are both aware that town have lost a couple of staffing employees, so they've asked the county sheriff whether he would backfill and so forth, and they presented the town presented an agreement, but it has some points of questions that the sheriff and I had on it. I just wanted to make sure that the board is fully on board for us to at least, the sheriff and I, to at least negotiate with the town and see if we can come up with a an agreement that's agreeable to both of us.
Yeah, that's a short-term, while that they're short of staff is what I,
Yes.
what I understand is you and the sheriff and the town are working together to
Yeah.
have some kind of proposal for the commissioners to look at.
Roberta was gone all last week, not all, but most of the week. So the sheriff and I need to tack base with her today and sit down and go over the points in the proposal that they gave us, go over the points that we have concerns with. So we'll proceed on that this week, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, just,
The other thing is amicus brief. That's Latin for friend of the court. We have out in the Warner Valley, the Cato Ranches, goes back to the BLM management revision of their management plan for the sage grouse. There were some areas that the BLM management took off the table as far as grazing. Those are research natural areas, also areas of critical environmental concern. The way the BLM management did it is questionable as far as whether it was arbitrary and capricious, so the Cato ranches lost a big chunk in the allotment. It just happened to be dead center, so they can't even pasture the cows across from one area to another. So they have decent, the BLM management in a suit, and the environmental groups that intervene on the site of the BLM management. This amicus brief is lesser than an intervening, it's just a letter of support for the Cahill ranches. And I'd like to tomorrow have a decision whether we want to, as a board of directors, side with the Cahill ranches with a letter of support to the
okay, have you ran this past legal counsel?
I'll be talking to, I mentioned it to them.
Okay, so he will be at our meeting tomorrow, so we should be able to have a more in-depth conversation of, we talked about this a year or two ago.
Yeah.
And I can't remember what exposure that gives
The amicus brief is lesser exposure than intervening. But that's why, and costs a lot less too.
I'll look forward to some more in-depth update with the legal counsel, because I'll be perfectly honest with you, I don't fully know what amicus brief would entail for us.
Well, a couple of years ago, entertained and the environmental groups assumed the Forest Service for the Chihuahuan allotments and also the Dry Creek allotments. And I kind of worked with the attorney for the ranchers, the Western Research Legal Counsel. And they sent me a couple of examples of American of amicus brief at that time, which was beyond my Arkansas education knowledge. So when I spoke with the gentleman again this year on this subject, he said I can just write it as a lay person and then just have our attorney just put this in. But we can, anyway.
We'll have further discussion on it tomorrow.
Yep.
Okay.
Strategic investment program. This was brought to my attention by Superintendent Dave Kerr of Norfolk School. We potentially have a large solar project go in up in Northern Lake. We also have one down at this end. And I'll let Dave kind of go over the details some first. And then I'd like to have Larry. Larry is with the Business Oregon, who in which this program invests, applies with.
Thank you.
My name is David Kerr. I'm the superintendent at North Lake School District, and I apologize for my voice. My wife tells me when my voice gets like this, I should just shut up.
Okay, Larry?
She says that in a loving way. The SIP came to my attention about a month ago. I was speaking with representatives of the solar company on their project. I've since done some significant research on it. I've talked to the Department of Education. I have a chain of emails from them from a few years ago. I've talked to various other superintendents in both Sherman, all of Sherman, Gilliam, Morrow, and Umatilla counties. But what I have in front of you, what I gave you, is a kind of a track sheet of school funding. I give it to my budget committee every year, and we laugh about it because school funding is kind of a complicated horse. The first page is just how we account for the number of students that we receive funds for. We have a average daily membership raw, which is just the number of bodies we have K through 12. And then there's a series of indicators where they weight different standards, whether they're special needs children, whether they're wards of the court, poverty, etc. And you come up with an average daily membership weighted. That's all the first page does, is show you how those figures are calculated. On the second page, there's a lot of circles and arrows because state funding, school funding is complicated. Section 1 is local revenue. Anything that comes through the county tax office becomes local revenue. And since Measure 5 passed in the early 90s, local revenue is taken by the state. It's part of the statewide funding formula. Sometimes we get pennies back on the dollar. So you can see about halfway down where the $841,000 we had in local revenue last year was subtracted from the state school funding formula. What the SIP does, the Strategic Investment Program, it allows companies like Obsidian to make contributions to the county that are outside of the local funding formula. That money stays in the county. Those schools that I mentioned, those counties that I mentioned, Umatilla, Morrow, Gilliam, Sherman, they have millions of dollars that have stayed in their counties because of the SIP process. And that's what I'm encouraging you to look at, as the totality of the circumstances surrounding the SIP. As I've spoken with the Department of Ed, their email chain of 4 years ago said that this falls outside the state funding formula. That money stays in the county. As I've talked to other superintendents from Pendleton to Sherman County, there are several, maybe a dozen schools directly that are benefiting from the SIP. If we were to receive $4 million in taxes, let's say from Obsidian, if that all went through the local funding formula, that money would leave the county from the school standpoint, school funding. We lose that money. If we work through an SIP and that money stays here, it doesn't go to Portland, it doesn't go to Beaverton, it stays in Lake County. And so that's what I'm asking you to consider. We've worked with not only our school's attorney, we've worked with other people that deal with SIPs on a daily basis. We've worked with the Department of Education in the last month. This program has merit, and I'm encouraging the commissioners to examine it thoroughly as it relates to money staying in this county.
So on the SIP, and I'm not fully versed on, I worked with Judge Thompson some in Sherman County, but to trigger an SIP, which is usually a 15-year agreement, if I'm not mistaken. And so how is, if we want to look at this, is this pushed by the developer or is this pushed by the county governing board?
You make the decision whether you're going to enter into an SIP agreement. And you make that agreement with the company. That's why I'm here to advocate that you take a serious look at this.
Okay. So as developers come in, we have, used Red Rock as an example, we negotiated a community service fee. Most solar projects right now, they like to take advantage of the payment in lieu of tax, which is $7,000 per megawatt. What you're proposing is for us to push more on the strategic investment plan, SIP, instead of either one of those others.
From a school funding if it goes through as a tax, the money doesn't stay with us.
Right.
It doesn't even stay with the county. This is the one statement from the Department of Ed in 2014. Michael Elliott is one of our financial gurus. He says the SIP gave local taxing districts the authority to exempt qualifying businesses from property taxes to attract investment, and so on. So I can provide you copies of these if you like. As I mentioned, I didn't know about SIPs until about 4 weeks ago. Kim and I had our first conversation. And you're correct that the copy of the contract I have with Sherman County is a 15-year contract.
And Larry the SIP policy and Larry's bill lag, can you give us kind of a position of how it works from your perspective?
I'd be happy to. I think I can make it in 10:15.
Okay.
We can drag it out till 10:15 if you want.
I'll try not to,
But we will.
sincerely. I'm Larry Holzgang, I'm Regional Development Officer for Business Oregon. And I thank you for inviting me, Commissioner Kessner and Commissioner Winters. So I get the less exciting part about the nuts and bolts of the strategic investment program. There's a number of incentive programs that have been authorized in statute from the state. I'm not going to go through the others, but rural renewable energy zones also affect solar if you want. There's some others, including the pilot. But what we really want to do is talk about the strategic investment program. One thing that you want to note before we get to the strategic investment program is there are commercial facilities under construction that any large industrial or solar or utility program can apply for to give them some tax relief while they're still under construction and the facility hasn't come into production. So, the strategic investment program, it was established in '93, but they amended it in 2003 to create a rural version, which is what you're going to be interested in. It is applicable to only very large capital investments. There's going to be a nominal property tax payment that will be made, and in this one it's, well, I'll get into that later. But initially, the very first strategic investment program was negotiated with Intel, and I'll have a slide on that a little bit later. New investment for the property has to exceed the taxable portion based on real market value. And when you ask about 15 years in statute, it is an agreement that is 15 years in duration, period.
Is it renewable?
No. You could enter into a new agreement if there's additional investment that would warrant it, but this one is 15 years. It is primarily based on an agreement that's going to be between the county and the business firm, and you'll have to hold a public hearing. You'll have to execute a written agreement with any other city, and although the solar project is not in a city limits, so that won't be applicable here. The governing body for the county votes on approving it. We don't really need to talk about if it's inside of the city. And I won't go into much detail, but the state also set up so that some counties have set up a strategic investment zone to offer the strategic investment program, in which case all of the negotiating is really set aside. It becomes a prescriptive path because the Board of Commissioners has set it up ahead of time. We've not done that here. There were only a few strategic investment zones across the state, but we've never had a project of this size in this county, so there's never been a need to set up an actual zone to handle multiple projects. Components. The taxes assessed against the value of the property, the assessed value of the property. In a rural zone, the applicant will pay property tax. If the project is less than 500 million, it's 25 million, but they'll pay the first 25 million of real market value or assessed value. If it's between, if the investment is between 500 million and $1 billion, the enterprise will pay tax on the first 50 million of assessed value. And if the project exceeds $1 billion in value, then the applicant will pay property tax on the first 100 million. So it's a sliding scale. You are a rural area throughout your entire county, so let me talk about that. The taxable portion that starts at 25 million, 50 million, or 100 million will increase at a rate of 3% per year. The assigned, starting with land, buildings, heavy equipment, etc., all goes into that first taxable portion. The remaining property is exempt from property tax for the next 15 years. So again, this is for very large projects. There is a community service fee that is associated with this, and this is what we were talking about before. The community service fee is paid directly to the county as a fee and not a tax. That is why the county retains that, and there's an agreement to share that with the school district. That's why it does not be, and why it is not included in the funding formula for schools across the state. So it's really the community service fee that makes this program of interest to the county, and the business will pay the lesser of 25% of the tax savings. So you subtract that first, I don't know how expensive the program is, but if we just took the $1 billion, you would subtract the first 100 million, they pay tax on that. The next 900 million is what's abated for 15 years. 25% of that would be the maximum community service fee, or 2.5 million, whichever is less. Does that make sense? So the maximum community service fee, regardless of anything, is 2.5 million.
Yeah, some towns, not here, but in the background without a visual person.
Okay. We'll keep plowing through here, and we can always go into more detail. There will be a local agreement between the business firm that can have further conditions. So let me be really specific here. Under the pilot for a 600 megawatt project, the pilot would pay taxes on about 4.2 million a year. With the community service fee having a maximum of 2.5 million, if you wanted to make it exactly revenue neutral, then you would have to enter into an additional local agreement with the business firm for additional conditions that would negotiate that remaining portion. There is no statutory employment requirements with this program. So you're used to using the enterprise zone where you have to have either one employee or an increase of 10% of employees in order for a firm to qualify. That is not written into this statute. So there are no requirements by statute for employment on the project. Which again is another reason why it makes the agreement a little bit simpler. Pursuant to county approval, the business firm applies, once they have an agreement with the county, the business firm would apply to Business Oregon for a final determination, and our commission will be the final decision-making body. The state application date will determine whether it's rural. As I go any further, there's also going to be a second agreement between the county and the local taxing districts. If you do not create that agreement yourselves, then within 3 months, I think I have a slide on that too, but within 3 months, our commission, of exercising this agreement and approval by our commission would determine how the community service fee would be dispersed.
And what was the catalyst to start that 3 months you mentioned?
Our commission approving the incentive.
Yeah, but what?
Then you have to have an agreement with the local taxing districts within 3 months as to how that community service fee is going to be allocated amongst the taxing districts.
When is the start of that 3 months?
Our commission's approval of the project. You can negotiate it ahead of time,
Yeah.
before it ever gets to our commission, but you have to have it done within 3 months after our commission acts. Otherwise, they'll do it for you.
Yes.
So the community service funds distribution is subject to a separate agreement, and it's gonna be among the city. We don't have a city up there, but the county and all the special service districts that represent it, and 75% of the district's taxing authority. So we'll look at what the total taxes are on the site, what the county collects, and what the school district collects, we'll back it out of that. And then you have to have agreement with 75% of the remaining taxing authority to enter into an agreement for this to go forward.
The other taxing districts.
Yes. So that's between the county and the other taxing districts. And that's where that 75% comes from. And that part's a little confusing, but we can help you walk through it when the time comes. Again, the agreement must be executed within 3 months of our commission's determination, and typically the parties have agreed to distribute the community service fee among themselves based off of the relative tax rates, but that doesn't always make sense because the needs of, say, a cemetery district may not be proportional to how much taxes are collected. They may not need that much. So it's going to be a negotiated agreement.
And while we're on the taxing district, up in where this proposed project is, there are 7 taxing districts.
Okay?
Health clinic, library, school district, ESD, et cetera, cemetery. Some of those are county-wide, some are regional specific. And can this program address other taxing districts outside, not affected by the project?
You can certainly address it, but they're not decision makers if they're outside the, if they're not levying a tax on that property, then they're not a decision maker and would not be a part of the agreement. Doesn't mean you can't distribute funds to them. It just means that they aren't gonna be a signatory to the agreement.
They're not part of the 75%.
Right. Okay, you were asking about process. The firm lays the project, and then the firm approaches the county, or the county and the firm get together. So that's what starts it, is an agreement between the company and the county. You negotiate the details of the strategic investment, then you hold a public hearing. The firm,
would that be, it would be in the location of the project, of course. Would it be countywide public hearing?
Yes.
Or just the taxing districts?
when you have a public hearing, it's always open to anybody, even the state people can attend, right?
I'm just curious, who do we send invites to?
Certainly you have to send invites to the folks that are in the area that are directly affected, but anybody of course can come. So after the public hearing, then the firm and the county will sign the agreements, and then the county has to vote to move forward with it.
So going back up, on negotiations, is it similar to, I did the negotiations for the community service fee with Red Rock as an individual commissioner, so it wasn't a public meeting and all that. And most investors, developers want to negotiate that away from public meetings. Is this set up the same way?
Yes.
We designate one commissioner, they negotiate, bring proposals for the full board to either support or not support.
Yes.
Same.
Perfectly fine. And then yes, after that, you would come to a formal vote. And then the firm is going to apply to my department, and that's when it goes to my commission for approval. And then it goes to construction. So this is the point at what that 3 months goes off. But in the meantime, you know, anywhere in this whole process, the county can meet with the local taxing districts to come to an agreement on how those funds are used. Okay. So you can see this box almost sits, I guess, off to the side on its own. So you can start that negotiating anytime it makes sense to. But again, I'm not going to go into the strategic investment zone other than to say that you can set up an actual zone. So if you thought you were going to be doing this multiple times, it might be good to kind of codify it formally so everybody gets the same deal.
Then would be, you have a zone, if different companies of different projects all together, I'm saying it would be best to have a zone.
Probably.
But if the proponent, the original proponent, stages his or her
The
facilities over
strategic
time.
investment program allows for, you know, the development to occur in stages. So that's perfectly okay.
Without needing to go to the zone.
Right.
Okay.
So why do counties not designate their whole county a zone?
You could, but most counties don't just because, you know, there's only been 9 counties out of all 36 that have ever had a strategic investment program, so most counties don't unless they, up in the north in the Columbia River Gorge where they're going to be doing multiple projects with multiple wind farms, then it starts looking like maybe it makes sense to establish a zone so that we don't have to go through these months of negotiation with every single one. It kind of lays out how the program is going to work. But most of these projects being so large, they're few and far between, and so they negotiate them individually. But you have that opportunity if you want to establish a zone. I'm not going to go through the process with the zone, it just streamlines things a little bit. Use and potential with a strategic investment. The experience has only been realized in 9 counties. It's always a giant project with unusual investments. So some of them that have taken place, Amazon, Genentech, Georgia Pacific, and then in the Columbia River Gorge, there's been 16 energy-related projects, primarily wind for the most part. I mentioned that Intel has been one of the big users of the program in the state of Oregon. They did 2 projects in '94 and '96 that totaled $3 billion. Then they came back to the county in '99 and 2001, where they entered into a new agreement, and that was for $12.5 billion. And then in between, when I said that they could be staged, they had investments that were going to occur between 2005 and 2010. So that totaled $25 billion. So one agreement with the county covered that whole range of time. And then in 2014, Intel identified multiple projects and they entered into yet another agreement with the county for $100 billion. So when you say this is a project that's used with very large investments, that kind of gives you a feel for it. The strategic investment programs have been set up in a few counties. None of them have been used. So that might be another great selling point for strategic investment programs, unfortunately. At the moment, the legislation, there is no sunset date on this program, but we always hear rumblings from the legislature, so you never know. There is a feature of the strategic investment program called gain share that is probably a little difficult to explain. But gain share allows for some return of income tax revenue by the project back to the counties. So the counties are giving up, in many cases, very large sums of property taxes that they might collect otherwise. So the state in 2007 began a program where over the course of those 15 years, the state would share some of the income tax generated from these projects with the counties where these projects sit. And the main beneficiary of that again, is Washington County with the Intel projects. But basically, 9 months after the tax year ends, the businesses have to report their payroll data to my department. We share it with the Department of Administrative Services so they can estimate how much revenue came in via income tax to the state, and then the state distributes 50% of that back to the county. So for projects that generate a lot of jobs, like Intel, that can be a pretty handsome sum. A lot of the projects are more modest in their job creation, so the receipts back to the county are pretty modest. The Department of Revenue is responsible for handling this yearly, the disbursement back to the counties. But it provides a good source of how much job creation we get out of these projects. So, estimating the benefit related to an enterprise zone. Some of the things that we need to capture are what is the tax rate? Is there any compression, which I don't believe there is up in North Lake? If the property is going to change its real market valuation, up or down. Real market value to the assessed value at the location will change and create a ratio on the ground. That will be factored in. And then phasing of investments over multiple years. So you can negotiate the agreement to accommodate the phasing, where enterprise zones are less flexible on that side.
Now, we have designated Full County as a remove or energy enterprise zone. How did that play with this now?
You would offer one or the other. So in terms of a project up in North Lake County, you can enter an agreement that is based off of the renewable energy zone, which operates like a enterprise zone does here that you have established. So the rules governing a rural renewable energy zone are identical to a regular enterprise zone. You have the payment in lieu of taxes program, and this is a third alternative for offering the same on a project that's sold. So, what kind of factors help the strategic investment program outperform a more short-term 100% exemption to an enterprise zone, or like the rural renewable energy zone in this case? If there's a substantial component in real estate acquisition, if the depreciation is slow, if there's a low CPR with more acquired property, then the assessed value is falling below real market value, that would help the SIP outperform an enterprise zone. Less phasing and quicker build out, and then low discount rate for the net present value, all would help the strategic investment program offer a more attractive incentive than enterprise zone.
But there's no comparison to the new legislation on the pilot for the payment with tax.
No.
So that hasn't been.
How that's going to play out is how you negotiate the community service fee and the local agreement. So we don't have an example of that, but property tax estimated over 17 years, assuming a 2-year construction period. This would be for a more typical industrial type project. But a 5-year enterprise zone, the company would make $19.4 million in payments on a $200 million project, and they would save about $13.8 million in abated taxes. On a strategic investment program for the same $200 million in a rural setting, the company would make payments of about $13.7 million, and their savings would be about $19.5. And that's because it's an example of $200 million, so their initial taxable property tax is based off of $25 million, whereas urban is always $100 million. So that's what I have. And questions?
So if we were to consider something like that, right now through the pilot program, it's a 20-year at $7,000 per megawatt. This is a 15-year thing. After the 15 years, would go to normal taxation.
Yeah.
And so it's whatever the Department of Revenue taxation formula would be at that time, not our formula here, it's all done. Right?
That would be, I presume, centrally assessed.
Yeah, so it's a 15-year guarantee, and then you go to centrally assessed through the normal taxation.
Yeah, when you say 15-year guarantee, the payment for the community service fee is the lesser of 2.5 million or 25% of the assessed value. Over that 15 years, the assessed value arguably probably decreases with depreciation. So instead of being a flat 2.5 million, there could be a line where that crosses and it becomes 25% of whatever the assessed value is. So that could pull down
But isn't
what
there
the community
something
service fee value is.
at the state on their formula, don't they take in the production on that side of it as part of the formula? I'm not
They can. The state actually has
Expert.
3 different methods that they will compare to determine what the value is. And one method would take into consideration the value of the product, that is, in this case, electrical energy. There are other methods that they would also examine and potentially use. And one is just real market value, what we sell for on the market today. One is original cost of depreciation.
Okay, so I have to go back trying to understand a lot of this, Larry. So the maximum on the SIP is 2.5 million. That
Community service.
For the community service fee. I'm going to use the project up north. It's proposed that it'd be about 4.2 million in taxation by this, the pilot program. So that other 1.7, they would still pay into the pilot program or normal taxation, or is it just go
No,
away?
if you enter it into the strategic investment program, you wouldn't layer the pilot on top. So you would have to negotiate a local agreement to address that.
For the 1.7. So taxation through the negotiations, you would keep it at the 4.2, but there'd be some flexibility with some of the dollars to be able to get them to the taxing districts.
That's a second agreement. So the first one, where you're negotiating what the community service fee will be and what the local agreement amount will be, is between the county and the company. And then there is a second agreement that has to be done, that is between the county and the taxing districts, that determine how those funds are going to be dispersed.
Being that this project is new to us, it's going to take a lot of homework study.
Yes.
It'd be nice to have an individual to help us walk through it. Do you know Brian Keenum with Community Renewable Energy Association? Are you familiar with that
I'm not.
organization?
No, but I'm sure that we can find folks that have had experience with the strategic investment program, and we can also answer any questions that the county and the company have through the
Well,
process. of negotiation.
AOC has the whole CREA committee, there's quite a bit of help out there through the Association of Oregon Counties. The counties have been through that.
Getting involved with CREA. CREA is Community Renewable Energy Association. There's lots of counties north of us, of which we're not a membership to, but it's only $100 a year, so we should. But they have the expertise, and that gentleman, named Brian, is the executive person that actually recommend it.
We can give you some examples as well.
actually, Mike Arthur of AOC recommended engaging Korea.
I think it's a good idea to gather as much information from multiple parties as you can, and then try to craft the agreement wisely.
But it really starts off with the Board of Commissioners getting themselves up to speed on it, and then entertaining a discussion with the proponent, and see if they are in agreement. And then work through the agreement there, bring in the taxing districts for another agreement, basically is the all in a nutshell.
Yep.
So,
Can you even summarize half hours worth of discussion in 3 seconds?
so question is all this has to be in place before the attorney's turn, before any construction.
Yeah. You want everything put in place prior to construction start, yeah.
So,
And we can have it 3 months after you guys, after the state signs off on the certificate.
I would recommend that you go ahead and contact the local taxing districts and bring them to the table earlier than that, but yes.
After we learn enough to know what's possible.
Yes.
okay,
Thank you.
thank you very much, appreciate it. Do you have any more? All right, so it's 10 o'clock, we're going to take a short recess, come back at 10:15. For those that weren't here, the 10:15 item will be a presentation to the Board of Commissioners of our duty as the advisory committee through the FSEC process. So we will listen to that presentation. After that, I hope to close the meeting, and Kellen has agreed to stick around to be able to answer a lot of questions. And so throughout that time, we may allow a few questions, but we're probably going to limit it at that amount of questions at that time, so that we can get educated on the process that we have to follow. This is the first, these two projects are the first EPSEC projects since my time and Commissioner Kessler's time, since we've been on the board, so new process. So we'll come back in at 10:15.